Hello, buddy. Welcome back to the Tin Man Score channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor, and today I'm reacting to my second Midnight Terrors video for you guys. And this was titled Four Disturbing True Police Horror Stories. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the lights off, move the camera up here for you guys, and let's get this reaction on the road and in the bag. Okay, here we go.
You don't really think about how much one moment can change your life until you live through one of those moments yourself.
Right.
I know that sounds cliche, but there's no better way to put it. I've been working as a police officer in Montana for most of my life, and if I'm being honest, it was never really my dream job. I didn't grow up wanting to wear the badge. It was just one of the few options I had, and I needed a paycheck. But once you're in, it's hard to leave. The job sticks to you, for better or worse. Some days, it's just a job. Other days, it's the reason I can't sleep at night. I've been called all kinds of things on the job. Some of them deserved, some not. I've been cursed at, spat on, and had bottles thrown at me during protests. I've seen good cops and bad cops, and I won't pretend like there aren't people in this profession who have no business being here. But I've also seen things that I wouldn't wish on anyone.
Well, at least he's being honest and telling the truth about it because he's right. Cops don't deserve to be shouted at and bottles being thrown at them and stuff, That's just wrong. Cops don't need all this hate. They're doing a good job protecting us on the streets, highways, and all these other public places from all the idiots out there. But anyway, let's continue.
Things I can't talk about with my family because I don't want them to know the world is as ugly as it really is. And there's one night in particular that I can never seem to get out of my head. It was April 2014, a little after midnight. I was driving down a mostly empty road when I noticed a red sedan swerving ahead of me. It barely missed the curb, then overcorrected so hard it almost clipped the oncoming lane. That was enough for me to flip on my lights and pull them over. I was already annoyed before I even got out of the car. Drunk drivers piss me off more than anything.
Hey, they make me mad too. You're not the only one. I don't know why they just can't take responsibility and get somebody to drive them back home.
I've seen what happens when they don't get caught in time. People getting ripped out of their lives for no damn reason. Families destroyed over something as stupid as one more drink. I walked up to the driver's window, and immediately, something felt off. There were 4 people inside, all of them young, maybe early 20s. The driver was sweating bullets, gripping the wheel like he was bracing for an earthquake. His hands were shaking, and his eyes kept darting toward the rearview mirror like he expected someone to come up behind him. I told him to roll the window down, and when he did, I could smell a mix of sweat and something chemical, something sharper than alcohol. I asked him if he'd been drinking, and his voice cracked when he told me no. I looked him over for a second and asked for his license. He hesitated, just for a second, but long enough to make my stomach tighten. That was when it clicked. His face was familiar. I'd seen his mugshot earlier that day. Richard Ramirez. Not that Richard Ramirez, obviously, but a guy with the same name who was wanted for an armed robbery the night before. I didn't let my face show that I recognized him. Instead, I stepped back slightly and casually radioed in for backup. That was when he moved. I saw his hand dart toward his jacket pocket, and before I even had time to think, I was pulling my gun. My voice came out sharper than I expected when I yelled at him to keep his hands where I could see them. I was bracing myself for the worst. He kept going. His fingers wrapped around something, and I saw the shape of it just before he started pulling it out. I didn't hesitate. I fired. The sound of the gunshot rang through my ears, but everything else was a blur. The other 2 guys in the back seat started yelling, but I kept my focus on Ramirez. He was slumped against the seat, wheezing, eyes wide like he couldn't believe what just happened. My heart was pounding, but I kept shouting orders. Hands up. Get out of the car. On the ground.
If you want an armed robbery suspect and kept on trying to grab for a pistol while he told you to keep your hands where he could see them, then he wouldn't fire at you, dude.
I barely remember them actually doing it. I barely remember calling it in. What I do remember, what I can never forget, is what I saw when I finally checked his pocket. It wasn't a gun. It wasn't even a knife. It was a small bag of meth. That's what he was trying to hide. That's why he was panicking. He wasn't pulling out a weapon. He was trying to shove the drugs deeper into his pocket, and I took his life for it. I don't remember how long I stood there, just staring at the bag in my hands. My hands were still shaking when my backup arrived. One of them came up to me, put a hand on my shoulder, and asked if I was okay. I don't even remember what I said. Maybe nothing at all. The paramedics tried to save him, but he was gone before they even loaded him into the ambulance. The next few weeks were a nightmare. His family sued me, said it was excessive force, that I should have waited, that I should have known. The judge cleared me of all charges, but that didn't matter. The internet didn't. People sent me death threats, called me a murderer. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was. I had nightmares about that moment for months. Him reaching, me pulling the trigger, then that awful silence afterward. I knew I did what I had to do. I knew I couldn't take the risk, but that didn't make it any easier to live with. Time moved on, and somehow so did I. It's been years now, and I don't think about it every day anymore. But some nights, when the house is quiet and I can't sleep, I see his face. I wonder if there was another way. I tell myself there wasn't. I tell myself it was him or me. But deep down, I know that doesn't really matter. The outcome is still the same.
I don't know what is people's problems. I understand the family was upset, but the cop had every right to pull his gun out. He was fearing of his safety. And then everybody had to get on there and then try to make him look bad. I mean, it's worse that the cop right here felt bad that he even shot him. But like I said, that boy was pushing that meth in his pocket and he thought he had a gun, so that's why he drew the gun out. I mean, if that boy wasn't so nervous moving stuff around, he probably would have lived. Man, I'm so sorry that cop had to go through all that.
If you had told me a few years ago that I'd leave the police force not because I wanted to retire, but because I had to, I probably wouldn't have believed you. I always thought I could handle whatever came my way. You see enough crazy things, and after a while, you start thinking you're immune to it.
That's another thing. Cops see a lot of crazy and dangerous stuff while on the force, and sometimes their mental state gets bad over time to where they don't want to be on the force anymore. They chose to go ahead and take the early retirement.
You're not. You just haven't met the moment that's going to break you yet.
Exactly.
For me, that moment happened in March 2021. It was just a regular afternoon, nothing unusual. I had pulled into a drive-thru, half thinking about what I was going to order, when my eyes locked onto someone stepping out of a red car a few spaces ahead. It took me a second, but then it clicked. Dennis Gilder Jr. He wasn't just some random guy. He had an active warrant out of Illinois, a long list of stolen vehicles and break-ins under his belt. And now, here he was, casually getting out of a car like he wasn't wanted in another state. I didn't have time to hesitate. The second he shut the passenger door, the car pulled off, and I followed. I didn't flip on my sirens immediately. No need to spook them too soon. But less than a minute later, I hit the lights. The car rolled to a stop, and another officer backed me up as we both approached. He went to the driver's side. I walked up to Dennis, still in the passenger seat. A woman was behind the wheel, gripping it so tight her knuckles had gone pale. I kept my voice steady. "Hey, man, I think you've got a warrant out of Illinois." Dennis barely reacted. He looked out the window, down at his lap, anywhere but at me. "Do you have your ID on you?" I asked. He shook his head. All right, I need you to step out of the vehicle for me. No response. I asked again and again. Still nothing. I could feel the tension in the air, like the whole car was wound up too tight and ready to snap. Something wasn't right. Then Dennis made his move. He rolled up the window and lunged across the car, shoving the woman out of the driver's seat. She screamed, scrambling to get back in, but he was already gripping the wheel. Step out of the car, now, I shouted. I moved to the front of the car, thinking maybe, he'd realize he had nowhere to go.
Oh, yeah, that guy figured out he was called and he did not want to go.
Instead, he floored it. I had half a second to react before the bumper slammed into me. I did the only thing I could. I grabbed onto the hood. Dennis started driving. At first, he kept it slow, maybe 10 or 15 miles, like he was still deciding how far he was going to take this. I crouched down, my hands gripping the edge of the hood so tight, my knuckles felt like they were going to split open. My gun was still in my hand, aimed right at him. Stop the car, I yelled through the windshield. Then, just like that, he floored it. The wind was slamming into me so hard I could barely see.
I mean, if you got a gun in your hand, just shoot at the window and he'll stop. Because that's dangerous if you're just trying to hold on to the top part of the car and he might hit the accelerator and you fly off.
My gun slipped from my grip. I couldn't reach for it. Couldn't reach for anything. One of my shoes flew off. I felt my fingers burning from the strain of holding on. Ahead, a train was rolling through an intersection. We were headed straight for it. At the last second, Dennis jerked the wheel left. I barely stayed on as he swerved onto another road. The new road led straight into a construction site. I knew what was coming before it happened. The car hit a bump. I lost my grip. I felt myself fly. The impact was so hard it knocked the breath out of me. White-hot pain shot through my back like someone had snapped me in half. I couldn't move. I could barely hear the sirens. Dennis? He kept driving. I don't know how long I lay there, gasping for air. It wasn't until I saw the other officer kneeling over me, shouting for paramedics, that I fully realized what had just happened. I spent weeks in the hospital. My vertebrae were fractured. I had a long recovery ahead of me. Dennis was caught later that day. The car broke down a mile away, so he stole another one straight from someone's garage before finally getting caught. The woman in the passenger seat, his girlfriend, was unharmed. Dennis was convicted a year later. He got 5 years. It didn't feel like enough. Not after what I'd been through.
Heck no, 5 years? I would gave him 10 to 20. I'm glad that they caught that guy. But I also am thankful that officer did not get hurt worse than what he already suffered. Man, my back was already hurting when he said vertebrae snapping. Oh. But again, I'm glad he's all right.
I went back to work 3 months later, but I wasn't the same. Every time I approached a car, I felt it, that sickening, stomach-dropping fear. I tried to push through it, but it never went away. By the end of 2024, I quit for good. Some things you just don't come back from. Dennis later apologized to me, said he panicked. I don't know if he meant it, but I forgave him anyway, not for his sake, but for mine. I hope when he gets out, he finds a better way to live.
I mean, I can see why you panicked. You don't want to get caught, but if he's telling you to step out of the car, you step out of the car. No question asked. Like the cop said here, I hope he did find a better way of life.
I grew up in a quiet, middle-class suburban town on the East Coast. The kind of place where people leave their doors unlocked, and the biggest crime you'd hear about was some high schooler getting caught smoking weed behind a gas station. But despite our relatively low crime rate, our town had an insane police presence. Unmarked police cars were everywhere, ranging from your typical Dodge Chargers and GMC SUVs to Jeep Wranglers and even fake taxi cabs. You never really knew who was an undercover cop and who was just a regular driver. Because of this, decommissioned police vehicles were common around town. They'd get auctioned off and sold to civilians, sometimes still sporting the spotlight and push bar, making them nearly indistinguishable from the real deal. A friend of mine even owned an old Crown Victoria that still looked like it belonged in a police fleet. That little detail never really mattered to me.
Yeah, that's the thing too, is that you even see people buying these old Crown Vics and these other old police cars, but sometimes they modify them, or sometimes they will leave the original paint and the spotlight on it, and you can't even tell if it's still an active police car or it's a retired one. Every time I drive around with my folks, it's always tricky. You see a car that look like a cop car, but then all of a sudden they roll past you and it's somebody who modified it to be like a lowrider or something. You always got to pay attention to them details.
Until one night, when it became the only thing that saved my life. It was a Friday night, sometime past midnight. I was heading home from a date, driving through an unfamiliar part of town. It was a long, quiet stretch of road, barely lit, with only the occasional passing car. That's when I noticed headlights creeping up behind me, fast. Within seconds, a car was tailgating me so closely I could barely see its headlights in my rearview mirror. I glanced at the speedometer. I wasn't speeding. I wasn't swerving. There was no reason for a cop to be following me. But sure enough, as soon as I reached a stop sign, blue and red lights flashed behind me. My stomach dropped. I had never been pulled over before, and on top of that, I was out past curfew for minors in my state. I was also carrying a small amount of weed, stashed under my spare tire in the trunk. I knew the cops in my town were ruthless when it came to drugs, even for something as minor as possession. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, and pulled into the nearest lot, an abandoned gas station. The officer stepped out of the car, and immediately, something felt off. He was young, probably in his early 20s, with shaggy blonde hair, longer than what most officers in my town were allowed to have. But the thing that stuck out the most? His pants. They were way too short, stopping several inches above his ankles, making his whole uniform look wrong.
So he ain't a real police officer then. He's probably one of them impersonators. Call the cops, the real cops, quick.
He leaned into my window, much closer than necessary, and smirked. "You know why I pulled you over?" I shook my head. "No, officer." His smirk widened. "I do." Then, without another word, he took my license, registration, and insurance card and walked back to his car. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I glanced at his vehicle in my mirror. Civilian plates. No department badge. No police markings of any kind. Shit. Something was very wrong. When he came back, his whole demeanor had changed. He leaned into my window again, this time speaking lower, more serious. "Go ahead and pull around to the back of the building for me." I blinked. "Huh?" "Behind the gas station," he repeated. "Now." Every single alarm bell in my body was screaming. There was no reason, none, for me to go back there. The gas station was abandoned. No cameras, no witnesses, nothing. I forced a smile. "Sure thing, officer," I said, turning on my car. As soon as he stepped away, I rolled up my window and dialed 911. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. The dispatcher answered, and I whispered, "I just got pulled over by an unmarked police car, and I think something's wrong." I read off his license plate, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a pause on the other end. Then the operator's voice came back, urgent and firm. "That is not a police vehicle. Get out of there now." I felt my stomach drop. I didn't even think. I threw my car into drive and peeled out from behind the building, cutting across the empty lot and speeding toward the road. The moment I did, he flipped on his lights and gunned it after me. I was still on the phone with 911, my voice breaking as I told them he was chasing me. I was in a 1994 Nissan that rattled if I went over 60 miles, and I was pushing it as hard as I could. the engine screaming in protest. He stayed right on my tail, lights still flashing, but no siren. I was flying blind, speeding down unfamiliar roads at 75, blowing through intersections, praying I wouldn't hit a red light. My only hope was to get to a main road, somewhere public, where someone had to notice what was happening. I finally recognized the turn for my town's main road. I swerved onto it, desperately scanning for a real police car. My town was notorious for speed traps. There had to be one somewhere. I saw the abandoned diner that sat at the front of my neighborhood. I had never passed it without seeing a cop hiding in the lot. With no other options, I took the gamble and whipped into the parking lot, slamming the brakes. Silence. No sirens, no flashing lights, nothing. I looked around, heart pounding. There was no one here. I thought I was going to die. I felt frozen, gripping the wheel so tightly my fingers went numb. Then I heard it, the slam of a car door. I squeezed my eyes shut, waiting for whatever was about to happen. Then, another door. Then another. I opened my eyes and looked in the mirror. 3 real police cars. 5 or 6 real officers, approaching cautiously, hands hovering over their guns. I've never felt relief like that in my life. The fake cop had taken off the second I turned into the lot. The officers took my statement, calming me down as best they could. Apparently, there had been a string of violent abductions in the neighboring state. Women pulled over by what they thought were police officers. Some were found alive. One wasn't. The description of the car matched the one that had just tried to pull me over. As far as I know, he still hasn't been caught.
I'm just glad that person right there found some real cops to talk to. But yeah, once he said pull right behind the gas station, that was suspicious right there, and you should have just already bolted when he left the car. Man, I wish he got caught.
A couple of years ago, I spent several months backpacking through Australia, living out of a van. It was the best way to save money on accommodations. Park anywhere, sleep anywhere. That kind of freedom was intoxicating, but I learned the hard way that sometimes cheap travel comes with risks you never consider until they're staring you in the face. I had been driving for hours that day, pushing myself past the point of exhaustion. It was just one of those nights where I kept telling myself, just a little farther, but eventually my eyelids started feeling too heavy. The next rest area I saw would have to do. When I pulled in, I realized just how empty it was. No streetlights, no other cars, just the stillness of the night and the distant hum of insects. During the day, it would have looked like a peaceful little roadside stop. But in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere, it had the atmosphere of a horror movie. The kind of place where, if something did happen, no one would be around to hear you scream. I tried to shake the thought out of my head. I was too tired to keep driving, and there was no reason to overthink it. I locked my doors, pulled the curtains shut, and settled into my sleeping bag. Sometime before dawn, I was ripped out of sleep by heavy knocking on the side of my van. "Open up! It's the police!" I bolted upright, heart hammering against my ribs. My brain struggled to catch up, still groggy, still trying to convince itself I was dreaming. Then came another round of knocking, louder, more urgent. "Open the door!" Instantly, my instincts told me something was off. First of all, why would the police be here? I was parked at a rest stop, exactly where people traveling through were supposed to stop. And if it was the police, why didn't I see any flashing lights? I moved as quietly as I could, creeping toward the front of the van. There was a small gap in the curtain, just enough for me to peek through without making it obvious. And that's when I saw him. A man stood right outside, his body partially illuminated by the moonlight. He was dressed kind of like a cop, dark clothes, maybe a uniform. But something was off. His stance wasn't right. His movements weren't right. Then my eyes flicked toward the car he came in. No lights, no markings. Just a normal-looking vehicle parked a short distance away. No way this guy is a cop. I felt my stomach twist. My hands were shaking. I tried to stay calm, but every instinct was screaming at me to do something now. I took a breath and forced my voice to sound as strong as I could. "Get the fuck away," I yelled. "I have a gun, and I'm calling the cops on the radio." I didn't have a gun. I didn't have a radio. But I needed him to think I did. For a second, there was nothing but silence. I couldn't see his face, but I saw the way his body stiffened, like he was considering his next move. Then, just as quickly as he had arrived, he turned and started walking back toward his car. And that's when I saw something that nearly made my heart stop. Another person stepped out of the bushes. I hadn't noticed them before. They must have been hiding just out of sight, waiting. Without a word, the second person climbed into the car. A few seconds later, they sped off, disappearing down the road. I didn't waste another second. I jumped into the driver's seat, fired up the engine, and peeled out in the opposite direction as fast as my van would go. I didn't stop driving for miles. To this day, I have no idea what their plan was. Robbery, carjacking, or something way worse. All I know is that I never made the mistake of parking alone in the middle of nowhere again.
Nope, they're not real cops. They were probably planning on dragging that guy out of his van, robbing him, and maybe kidnapping him. I don't know. But yeah, once you said it described that one of them guys had stiffen up their back, that was a sign like, oh yeah, they know they're in trouble. They had to get out of there quick. That's something you got to look out for. If they don't have police lights or sirens or identifying markings on their vehicles, then they're not the real cops. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on post notifications for more Midnight Terrors content like this. This has been another successful installment of the Tin Man's Corner channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor, and I said that's a wrap, and have a nice day, y'all.